Trust me, this story will grab your heart. The ballroom glittered like a kingdom of glass. Crystal chandeliers rained light across marble floors, polished so perfectly, they reflected the red soles of stiletto heels and the glossy black shoes of Manhattan's most powerful men. Every corner of the room whispered of money, ambition, and ruthless competition. At the center of it all, Andrew Weston stood tall, his tuxedo cut to perfection, his arm linked proudly with a woman who looked like she had stepped straight out of a pageant crown ceremony. "Gentlemen," Andrew declared, raising his glass high, his voice booming through the hall. Applause scattered through the crowd. Leia blushed theatrically, pressing herself against him with a soft giggle. Everyone knew Andrew had divorced his wife only months earlier. To flaunt a beauty queen so soon felt shameless. But in this world of sharp smiles and sharper knives, scandal only made the spotlight brighter. "Andrew always lands on his feet," one banker murmured to another. But beneath the glitter, not everyone was impressed. "His poor ex-wife," one whispered. "She's pregnant, isn't she?" He raised his champagne once more, grinning smugly. It was the image Andrew had dreamed of. Power, beauty, triumph. But fate was cruel, because outside the glittering walls of the gala, another story was about to crash into his. At that exact moment, a sleek black limousine rolled across the private runway of LaGuardia's executive terminal. Its doors opened and a figure emerged, elegant even in simplicity. Emma Weston, 6 months pregnant, stepped carefully onto the tarmac. A tailored ivory coat hugged her frame, the soft fabric draping gracefully over the swell of her belly. Her heels clicked against the pavement, steady and proud. For weeks, she had hidden, nursing the wounds of betrayal, of abandonment, of humiliation. Tonight was different. Tonight, she was no longer alone. Alexander Blackwell, the reclusive billionaire whose empire stretched from Wall Street to Silicon Valley, walked beside her. Broad-shouldered, immaculately dressed, and known for his ruthless intelligence, Alexander was the kind of man even Andrew Weston secretly feared. Cameras erupted in bursts of light. But across the city, screens lit up with breaking news alerts. Exclusive, billionaire Alexander Blackwell arrives in New York with pregnant mystery woman. Back at the gala, Andrew's phone buzzed relentlessly in his pocket. But when one of his associates leaned over, his face pale, and muttered, "Andrew, you might want to look at this," the first crack split through his confidence. He glanced at the phone, his smirk faltering as he saw the photo. Emma, pregnant, glowing, and beside her, Alexander Blackwell, his hand protectively guiding her. Forgotten wife returns with a billionaire by her side. Andrew's grip on his champagne glass tightened, his laughter died in his throat. Her childhood was modest but filled with warmth. Her mother's voice was gentle but firm, teaching Emma that strength was not loudness. It was endurance. Emma carried those lessons into adulthood. She chased kindness, laughter, the kind of love her parents had shown each other for 30 years. When she met Andrew Weston at a charity fundraiser in Manhattan, she thought she had found it. His tuxedo didn't hide the fact that he was still a man climbing the ladder, not yet the polished figure of Wall Street he would later become. He'd made her laugh with an offhand joke about the stuffy event. For Emma, who had just moved to the city to work as a flight attendant, it felt like fate. Andrew swept her into a world she had never known. Dinners at rooftop restaurants, tickets to Broadway shows, walks down Fifth Avenue, where he whispered promises of forever. She believed every word. When he proposed in Central Park, down on one knee under the twinkle of fairy lights, Emma's answer had been instant. Yes. The wedding that followed was elegant, though not extravagant. And as Andrew slipped the ring onto her finger, she thought she was stepping into the life she had always dreamed of. She brought home small souvenirs from her flights. Andrew would grin and say, "One day we'll go there together." Emma held on to that dream, never realizing that his hunger for more would one day consume them both. Emma excused it. He wanted to give them a better life. Instead, the distance grew. He didn't whisper to their unborn child. She decorated the nursery alone, folding tiny clothes into drawers with trembling hands, whispering to the baby that everything would be okay. At first, Emma refused to believe it. She had faith in him, faith in their love. She told herself gossip was cruel and baseless. But the truth was crueler. The night she found the lipstick-stained cufflink in his briefcase was the night her world collapsed. "You'll always be the mother of my child, but Leia, she's my future." He didn't just cheat. She thought she would crumble, that she would fade into the shadows. She ignored the whispers, the pitying looks from neighbors who had seen the headlines about Andrew and his glamorous new fiancée. She told herself she didn't need revenge. She only needed peace. And yet deep down, a flame burned. A quiet vow she whispered in the silence of her small rented room. "One day, they will see. One day, I will not be the woman they pity. I will be the woman they regret losing." That vow grew stronger the night she received an unexpected call. It was from Alexander Blackwell, a man whose name alone sent tremors through boardrooms. "I hear you've been through challenges. I have a proposition. I believe that person is you." Emma was stunned. She was just a pregnant woman trying to piece her life back together. But Alexander saw something in her that she had forgotten. For the first time since Andrew's betrayal, she didn't feel broken. She felt chosen. She wasn't walking into a ballroom as Andrew's discarded wife. And when the doors opened, she knew Andrew would see her not as the woman he left behind, but as the woman he could never have again. The Bright Futures Charity Gala was not just another evening of champagne and glitter. It was the event of the season. To miss it was to admit irrelevance. The venue itself was a masterpiece of opulence. The Grand Renaissance Hotel, a towering structure in the heart of Manhattan that had hosted presidents, royalty, and moguls. Its ballroom was a cavern of light with chandeliers dripping crystals like frozen waterfalls, gilded archways carved with Renaissance angels, and a floor wide enough to host 100 couples dancing without ever brushing sleeves. That night, the air was thick with perfume and ambition. A string quartet played Mozart near the staircase, the sound weaving through the conversations of men in tuxedos and women in gowns worth more than most homes. The women wore diamonds the size of raindrops. Every smile was measured, every compliment layered with calculation. At the center of it all stood Andrew Weston. He relished nights like this. To him, the gala was not about charity, but about conquest. His fiancée, Leia Hart, looked radiant in a sequin gown of pale gold that clung to her frame. Her crown as a former Miss New York was not on her head, but the aura of it surrounded her. The two of them worked the room like performers on stage. Andrew laughed loudly at jokes, clapped shoulders, shook hands, and let Leia twirl under the chandeliers like a prized possession. Socialites whispered that he was moving up in the world. In one corner, a pair of older women clutched their pearls, shaking their heads. A man standing nearby added, "I heard he barely gave her anything in the divorce, left her with scraps while he flaunts a beauty queen." Typical Andrew Weston. The murmurs traveled, weaving through the room like smoke. A politician made a speech about the importance of education for underprivileged children. Guests applauded politely, then returned to their conversations about yachts, private islands, and Wall Street triumphs. The orchestra swelled into a waltz. Couples drifted to the floor, gowns sweeping like waves, tuxedos gliding with precision. But as Andrew spun her, his eyes caught the entrance doors. A murmur was moving through the crowd near the staircase. Phones began to buzz, heads turned. He tightened his hold on Leia, forcing a smile for the cameras. But he felt it, the shift in the room, the sudden hush, the ripple of tension cutting through the music. The room gasped as one. Every step she took echoed across the marble, her heels clicking with defiance. She didn't look discarded. His presence alone silenced conversations. He was a man who rarely appeared in public. The photographers reacted instantly. Guests whispered louder, their curiosity turning into electric fascination. Andrew froze mid-step, his grip on Leia faltered. His face, once smug and confident, drained of color. He could not process what he was seeing. Emma, his pregnant ex-wife, was supposed to be gone, forgotten, invisible. Leia tugged on his arm, whispering, "Andrew, what's wrong?" The room was no longer his. Guests surged to the edges of the floor, craning for a better view. The whispers became a roar. Fear. Because Emma hadn't just returned, she had returned stronger. And she wasn't alone. From the time he was a boy, he craved attention. For years, Emma had fueled that need, standing quietly beside him, her humility making him appear larger. Leia thrived in the spotlight. Even before she won her beauty queen crown, she was addicted to the rush of cameras flashing, of strangers whispering her name. His tailored tuxedo, his expensive watch, his smooth words. He was a ticket to something bigger. Leia wasn't subtle or patient. She laughed loudly, touched his arm in public, and made sure every eye in the room saw them together. For a man who craved recognition, it was intoxicating. By the time Andrew's marriage was unraveling, Leia had already slid into his life like she owned it. She mocked Emma's simple clothes, ridiculed her modest upbringing, and whispered in Andrew's ear that he deserved more. Every glance, every whisper of admiration made him feel taller, richer, untouchable. But the truth was uglier. Andrew was reckless. He spent money he didn't have, borrowing from investors to fund his lavish lifestyle. Even as his accounts bled dry, she demanded more, and he gave more, desperate to keep her satisfied. Leia knew it, too. Behind her dazzling smile, she saw the cracks. She had no loyalty to Andrew's character, only to his wealth and the doors he could open. She saw a stepping stone. And Andrew was too blinded by vanity to realize it. "That's because I'm the upgrade," Leia said sweetly, though her words carried a sting. "No one even remembers your ex-wife. I'm unforgettable." Leia noticed before Andrew did. The moment the whispers began, the way the photographers turned their cameras, she felt her grip on the room slipping. And when she turned to see Emma, pregnant, radiant, and walking beside Alexander Blackwell, her smile faltered. His jaw tightened, his eyes locked on the scene unfolding before him. He saw not just Emma, but Alexander, his competitor, his superior, a man he could never outshine. And together, they looked untouchable. People will forget her soon enough. And right now, the image of Emma, glowing and strong beside a billionaire, was already eclipsing her own sequined gown and perfect smile. The crowd's whispers grew louder. "She looks incredible." Rage burned in his chest, mixing with fear. Leia pulled away slightly, her eyes narrowing. She had no intention of going down with him if his empire crumbled. Her loyalty was as thin as her patience. He straightened his shoulders, forcing a smile as he whispered to her, "Don't let them see weakness. Tonight is still ours." No one was watching Andrew anymore. The story had shifted. Andrew's arrogance cracked under the weight of it. And within minutes, Alexander Blackwell would step to the microphone, and Andrew's carefully crafted kingdom would begin to crumble before the entire world. The ballroom, once buzzing with laughter and shallow conversation, had fallen into a heavy, breathless silence. Only the sharp clicks of cameras punctured the air. Emma Weston stood beneath the golden chandeliers, her ivory gown glowing like moonlight against the marble floors. Her pregnancy was visible, yet instead of making her appear fragile, it gave her an aura of strength, as though she carried not just a child, but justice itself. At her side, Alexander Blackwell was a towering presence. He was a shield, a declaration, a warning. The crowd parted instinctively as they walked forward. "Is that Emma Weston? She looks radiant." Andrew's world was tilting. His smile was gone, replaced with the stiff jaw of a man watching everything slip through his fingers. Leia leaned closer, forcing a smile though her nails dug into Andrew's arm. "Don't you dare look weak." The MC, a well-known society journalist, cleared his throat nervously at the microphone. His eyes flicked between Andrew and the entrance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered. "Please welcome Mr. Alexander Blackwell and his guest, Mrs. Emma Weston." The ballroom erupted. Photographers swarmed, flashes bursting like lightning. Reporters pushed forward, shouting questions. "Mrs. Weston, how does it feel to return? Mr. Blackwell, are you two a couple?" The questions hit Andrew like bullets. Every lens, every flash, every word was focused on Emma. She didn't need to. She was not begging. She was rising. He stormed toward her, dragging Leia behind him, his voice trembling with forced bravado. All eyes turned to them. Andrew's words echoed, harsh and cruel. Emma stopped walking. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a calm, clear voice that carried across the hall, she answered. "You humiliated me, and now you dare to accuse me for simply existing." The truth, whispered for months, was now spoken aloud for everyone to hear. Andrew's face went crimson. "You never belonged in my world." A murmur of disapproval swept the ballroom. Even Leia flinched at his words. The women in the crowd exchanged looks of disgust. Men shifted uncomfortably. His arrogance, once magnetic, was now repulsive. Emma stepped closer, her voice steady, her hand resting gently on her belly. "It was you. You couldn't see what you had. You threw away loyalty, love, and family for vanity, for greed." She flicked her eyes at Leia, who shrank under the attention. The crowd erupted in whispers again, this time sharper, judgmental. She stood by him, and he abandoned her pregnant. Andrew's mouth opened, but no words came. At that moment, Alexander stepped forward. His deep voice carried an authority that silenced the whispers instantly. "This woman," he said, gesturing to Emma, "is not to be pitied. She is to be respected. She has endured what most could not, and she stands stronger than ever." The ballroom roared with applause. Emma stood motionless, tears shimmering in her eyes, but not tears of sorrow. They were tears of vindication. Andrew's face twisted. He tried to shout over the applause. The cameras ignored him. His desperate cries fell into emptiness. The moment was coming when she would speak her truth, and nothing in the world could stop her. She had stood tall in front of the people who once pitied her, spoken with a voice steady enough to make even Andrew tremble. But the moment the doors closed behind her, away from the cameras and the crowd, the weight of it all came crashing down. The strength she had carried like armor slipped away, revealing the fragile truth underneath. She wasn't invincible. She was a woman 6 months pregnant, exhausted, humiliated, and afraid. Her breaths came fast and shallow. "I'm trying." For weeks, she had prepared herself for this moment. The confrontation, the spectacle, the reckoning. But no amount of preparation could erase the years of pain Andrew had left behind. She pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a sob, but it came anyway, raw and aching. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen through blurred vision. Dozens of messages from unknown numbers, journalists, gossip bloggers. The woman who stole the gala. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she had been left with betrayal, whispers, and now the unbearable glare of the spotlight. A hand touched her shoulder gently. She looked up. Alexander Blackwell stood over her, his face etched with something few ever saw in him, concern. The world knew him as ruthless, cold, untouchable. "I wanted to be strong in there. I felt it, but now I feel like I can't breathe." Alexander crouched beside her, his hand steady on her arm. Strength is breaking and still choosing to stand up again. She looked into his eyes, searching for judgment, pity, anything that would make her feel smaller. But all she found was respect. "I hate him," she whispered. "You loved him," Alexander replied. "You gave him your trust, your loyalty, your future. But it will eventually, and when it does, all that will remain is the woman you are becoming right now." Emma's sobs softened. The sound of the ballroom beyond was muffled here, but she knew the world hadn't stopped. Leia, scheming. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to curl up and let the world forget her again. The gentle kick of her baby inside her. A reminder, a reason, a vow. Her child deserved a mother who stood tall, not one who vanished into shadows. "I don't know if I can face them again," she admitted. "And then rise. Not your tears, but the way you rise after them." The billionaire and the betrayed wife. Two figures from different worlds bound by a single truth. Survival. Emma wiped her eyes, her breathing steadier now. She adjusted her gown, placed her hand over her belly again, and whispered, "We're going to be okay. I promise." She stood slowly but with determination. Alexander rose with her, offering his arm. She took it not as a crutch, but as an alliance. Emma hesitated. Then she nodded. A journalist, red-faced and panting, rushed in, clutching his phone. He froze when he saw them, his eyes wide with the kind of excitement that only came from breaking news. Social media, the networks. Andrew's private texts with Leia leaked. It's trending worldwide. Everyone knows the truth now. Andrew's texts mocking her, ridiculing her pregnancy, bragging about discarding her, were everywhere. The journalist, flustered but eager, held up his phone. "Said your pregnancy made you unappealing. And it's not just texts. There are voice recordings, too. The wounds Andrew left hadn't fully healed. And now the world was peeling them open." But as her chest tightened, she noticed something else. A strange, quiet calm. His eyes flicked to Emma, sharp and steady. "This isn't weakness, Emma. This is leverage." Emma frowned. A man who mocks his pregnant wife publicly while flaunting a mistress. These texts aren't just gossip. They're dynamite. Her hands trembled as she remembered nights crying into her pillow, whispering apologies to her unborn child for the chaos. Now she had the chance to turn all of it into something more than pain. But could she? He glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. "It's worse than we thought," he said quietly. "Financial records, fraud, shady loans, fake charity donations. The sharks are circling." "You mean he could go to prison?" Alexander's eyes locked on hers. "If these documents are real, and they look very real, then yes." "And Emma, do you realize what this means?" Her breath caught. All she had wanted was dignity, a chance to show her child she hadn't been broken. But now the universe seemed to be handing her something far bigger. The journalist's phone buzzed again. "Emma, there's a document circulating, a prenup with Andrew's signature." Emma searched her memory. Their wedding day had been a blur of flowers, laughter, vows. She hadn't noticed what else Andrew had slipped in. "It's everywhere now. Some say it's fake. But the signature, it's clearly his." If the prenup was real, then Andrew hadn't just underestimated her. Alexander's voice was low, steady, a lifeline in the storm. "This is your moment. You hold the power now. Not just because of me, not because of the press, but because Andrew's empire is crumbling under the weight of his own sins. You can face him, and you can win." Emma's hands tightened over her belly. She thought of her parents who had taught her endurance. She thought of her child who would one day ask about this moment. "So you'll give a statement?" "Yes, but not just words. The world deserves to hear the truth from me tonight. Alexander smiled faintly, a rare glimmer of pride softening his stern features. Then let's give them a night they'll never forget. The journalist hurried off to prepare his breaking story, leaving Emma and Alexander in the quiet hallway. Instead, it had become his trial. The doors to the ballroom loomed before her. "This isn't just for me anymore," she whispered. "This is for us. Yes, let's end this." The crowd was waiting. The cameras were ready. And as the doors creaked open, Emma Weston walked back into the ballroom. Her heart thundered, her palms damp. They weren't looking at her with pity anymore. They were looking at her with expectation, with awe. Emma drew in a breath. "Many of you know me as Emma Weston," she began, her voice clear, steady. "Some of you remember me as the quiet wife who stood behind Andrew at galas like this." Emma continued, "But I am not that woman anymore. Tonight, I stand here not as Andrew's wife, not as his ex-wife, but as myself." The words rang through the hall like a bell. He betrays the vows he made before God, the trust of the community, and the dignity of the very child he should protect. Andrew Weston may have thought he was leaving me behind, but in truth, he left behind his own honor. All eyes shifted toward Andrew. He stood rigid near the dance floor, his face pale, his fists clenched. Leia hovered beside him, no longer the dazzling fiancée, but a shadow shrinking under the weight of judgment. Emma turned her gaze back to the crowd. "For months, I thought I was weak. I thought I was unworthy. I cried alone. But then I realized weakness is not crying." Now he was watching her rise, not because of him, but because of her own fire. Emma raised her chin higher. "To every woman in this room who has ever been silenced, dismissed, or made to feel small, this is not the end. We are not defined by the men who betray us." The women in the audience erupted in cheers. The men shifted uneasily, some clapping, others whispering nervously as Andrew's reputation sank lower with every second. He stormed forward, shouting, "Enough." Emma turned, her eyes locking on his. For the first time, she did not flinch. The crowd roared. Emma took a step closer to the microphone, her hand resting on her belly. "I was betrayed, but I did not break. I stood tall, and I claimed the dignity that was mine all along." The applause was deafening. Emma felt it wash over her like a tide, filling the cracks inside her heart with something new. Not pride in her beauty, not in wealth or power, but in survival, in dignity, in transformation. The music swelled as the orchestra almost instinctively began to play again. It was for her. Emma turned, handing the microphone back to the MC. She no longer needed it. Her message had been delivered. The crowd was hers. Alexander stepped forward, offering his arm. Together, they descended the steps from the stage, the crowd parting like waves. Andrew shouted again, desperate. "This isn't over. The only one who will regret anything tonight, Andrew, is you." The crowd gasped. Andrew's rage boiled over, but his words were drowned by the thunderous applause that followed Emma out of the spotlight. The battle wasn't over. Andrew was desperate, dangerous, and cornered. A move so reckless it could shatter everything Emma had just built. He knew what was happening outside those gilded walls. Social media was tearing him apart. Investors were texting each other, reconsidering partnerships. His polished image was crumbling faster than he could contain. If he was going down, he planned to drag Emma with him. "Excuse me," he barked, snatching the microphone from the MC's trembling hands. "I won't let lies ruin me." The ballroom fell into uneasy silence. "She wants your sympathy. But the truth is, she's nothing without men to carry her. First me, now Blackwell." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. He knew exactly where to stab, in the place where her insecurities still lingered. But then from the corner of her eye, she saw Alexander step forward. He didn't reach for the microphone. He simply pulled a sleek black folder from his briefcase and handed it to a man near the front. The head of the gala's board of trustees. Then let's talk about yours. She gestured to the board member who now held the damning documents. Those papers contain records of your fraudulent transactions, fake charity donations, money laundered through shell accounts. The crowd erupted in chaos. Guests turned on Andrew, their admiration transforming into disgust. Emma's voice didn't waver. I worked when you cut me off. I survived when you mocked me. And tonight, I stand here not because of a man, but because you underestimated me. The applause roared like thunder. Alexander stepped forward, his deep voice carrying authority. And in case anyone doubts the validity of these records, I've already forwarded them to federal investigators. The room gasped as one. Reporters rushed to file breaking news. He tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. He looked to Leia for support, but she had already slipped to the far side of the room, distancing herself from his downfall. Emma took one final step forward, her hand resting on her belly, her voice soft, but sharp. Tonight, the world sees the truth. It wasn't me who wasn't enough. The crowd rose to its feet. They were tears of release, of victory, of justice finally delivered. Andrew staggered back, his body trembling. He had no words left, no defenses, no allies. Security began to move forward, summoned by a quiet nod from Alexander. The gala would continue without Andrew Weston. She had dreamed of this moment. And yet, as the applause swelled around her, she felt something unexpected. Desperation. The ballroom was still buzzing with chaos when security closed in on Andrew Weston. His once flawless tuxedo looked wrinkled under the sweat dripping down his temples, his perfect mask of confidence shattered. People who once shook his hand eagerly now stepped back as though he carried a plague. His name, once spoken with admiration, had become poison in the air. Andrew's voice cracked as he shouted, "You can't do this to me. I'm Andrew Weston. Do you hear me? Not anymore." Reporters captured every desperate word, every trembling step, while whispers filled the room like thunder. Emma stood still, her hand resting on her rounded belly, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths. For years, she had endured Andrew's cruelty in silence. Now she watched him unravel in front of the very crowd he had tried to impress. And for the first time, she felt no fear, only closure. Alexander stepped to her side, his hand brushing hers. He leaned close and whispered, "It's over. He can't touch you again." Emma nodded, though her eyes stayed on Andrew. She needed to see this end. Not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted finality. His voice cracked, pathetic now. Emma met his eyes one last time. Her voice was calm, steady. "You already destroyed yourself, Andrew, and you'll have to live with that." It wasn't heavy with fear. The MC, shaken but composed, returned to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight was meant to be about charity, about giving hope to those who need it most." The audience rose to their feet, clapping thunderously. Emma felt tears sting her eyes, not of pain this time, but of something deeper. In the car waiting outside, Emma leaned back against the leather seat, one hand still on her belly. She whispered softly, "We're free now. You didn't just survive tonight, Emma. You conquered it. You stood in front of the world, and you didn't break. For a long time, I thought strength meant never falling apart." The city lights glittered outside the window as they drove away, leaving the grand renaissance behind. There would be trials, hearings, endless news cycles about Andrew's crimes. But none of it mattered anymore. She had her dignity. Weeks later, as the scandal consumed Andrew, Emma's life began to blossom again. The paparazzi still lingered, but gradually their interest faded as new scandals replaced Andrew's. Emma focused on preparing for her child. She painted the nursery walls a soft shade of yellow, filled the shelves with storybooks, and folded tiny clothes with trembling hands. Alexander visited often, sometimes to discuss legal matters, sometimes simply to bring dinner and sit quietly in the garden with her. He simply stayed, a presence both steady and kind. "You've done so much for me, Alexander. I don't know how to thank you." He looked at her, his expression gentle. "You don't owe me thanks, Emma. I didn't save you that night." Possibility. The room was filled with light, laughter, and love. The very things Andrew had stolen but could never destroy. Months later, news broke that Andrew Weston had been sentenced to prison. His name, once carved in marble across the city, became a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. She had no need to. Her victory was not in his punishment, but in her freedom. One beautiful spring afternoon, a year after the gala, Emma sat on a park bench, watching her daughter, Lily, take her first wobbly steps on the grass. Alexander was there, kneeling a few feet away, his arms open wide. "Come on, Lily," he encouraged, his voice softer than the world ever knew it to be. "You can do it." He lifted her up, and she squealed with delight, her tiny hands patting his cheeks. Emma watched them, a profound sense of peace settling over her. "She looks like you," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "She has your strength." Emma smiled. But she had risen. We are not defined by those who hurt us. We are defined by how we rise after the fall, and we always rise. She was the woman who rose stronger than ever. And this was only the beginning. Our story has come to a close. Emma's journey isn't just about betrayal or revenge, it's about reclaiming her strength. It's about the truth that we are never defined by what others do to us, but by how we choose to respond. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." She faced humiliation, heartbreak, even despair. But she refused to let those moments define her. We've all had moments like Emma's. It means using it as fuel to rise. And one day, just like Emma, you'll look back and realize you didn't just survive. You grew. You rose. If this story spoke to you, if it made you feel seen or gave you strength, then do us a favor. Hit that like button, share this with someone who might need it, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story that could change the way you see your own life.